Okay, we are here at NS conference with on the stage actually with Aaron Hillegass. Hi, Aaron.
Hello.
How are you doing?
It's been a great conference so far. Just a really nice group of people, good questions, very engaged. Yeah.
You've been here since Saturday, right?
I have. I flew in and I really haven't left the building since Saturday morning.
Pretty cool. All right. So first of all, let's get a little bit of background for those of us who don't know you and who don't know one of the books you wrote.
So I'm most known for writing the book Cocoa Programming for Mac OS X, which is primarily on how to write applications for the Macintosh. But actually a lot of people are also using it to get introduced to the ideas behind the iPhone as well.
And so you started programming this thing a couple of years ago.
Yeah, 19 years ago I started writing applications for the iPhone. And then I was in the basement of the University of Washington physics building and I wrote my first Next Step application. And then I worked at Next for several years, and then I was actually there during the merger, so I worked for Apple as well. And now I have my own company, Big Nerd Ranch. We do training, consulting, and we publish books on Cocoa, iPhone, Ruby on Rails.
How was it back in the days being this bunch of nerds programming a computer who not everybody had?
Well, I mean, it was always funny to us. We always figured that the rest of the world was going to catch on, and it just didn't. We just didn't realize it was going to take 19 years.
Yeah. Well, because really, when the iPhone came, that's really when everybody started hearing about Objective-C and Cocoa.
That's right, and a lot of people still resist Objective-C and Cocoa, but if you want to program on the iPhone, it's really the only way to go. Yeah.
It's good that you say resist because it's. I mean, you've been sticking to this Objective-C and Cocoa things for so many years, so it means for you it's where the true is.
Right, and I think that most people look at it and it looks very strange and scary. But actually, if you just take an afternoon and work on it, you understand Objective-C. Take another week, and you'll really understand the Cocoa frameworks as well. So it's just fear that keeps people from really committing to learning. And once they've learned it, they're like, oh yeah, this is very straightforward. And they would never think of going back to C++ to do iPhone programming. It's just that that's what's comfortable to them.
I've been introduced to Objective-C a couple of years ago as to being part of the square bracket gang.
Oh, yeah. So at C4, Jonathan Wrench came up with the gang sign for Objective-C programmers, which goes like this. So it's the square brackets. So, yeah.
I had this quote from Gus Muller, but which apparently obviously stole it to somebody else. But you would agree that Objective-C and Cocoa are different than anything else in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would, of course, argue that they're better in many ways. But there's just small things that throw people off. The syntax looks weird. We use a lot of square brackets. The idea of the nib file, that it's this archive of objects that are then brought back to life, are scary to people.
Well, and a lot of other stuff like that. I'm just gonna move here the pointer to be sure we're still recording, because otherwise it freaks me out. All right, so you've been giving here a talk about data persistence and surprising pretty much everybody about bringing something interesting, so maybe you can speak about it.
Sure. So what I did is I talked about data persistence, and I talked about archiving and core data and what they were appropriate for. And then I brought up the fact that core data has a limitation, that you can't really do ordered relationships, that you sort of have to simulate them with an intermediate table, and that this makes your code more awkward, and it also degrades your performance. So I put forward a framework that, if you're in this situation, can make your application save and load data 10 to 25 times faster.
It's kind of, don't you think it's kind of weird that all those, that was my first side at core data NS set, having all those things in NS set and not in NS arrays.
Right. So if you've been doing Cocoa programming, you do a lot of things with arrays, and then when you fetch from core data, all of a sudden you have that a department has a set of employees, and a set doesn't have any inherent order, and it is really disturbing. But it is inherent with the relational model, and we have to remember that behind core data is a SQL database, so they expect a relational model.
I guess I'm probably not the only one Objective-C programmer whose first exposure to NSSet is actually working with core data.
No, I think that's really common. Yeah. NSSet has been in Foundation for 15 years, but no one was using it for anything. So it was all kind of surprising to everyone to see set take such a central role in core data.
We spoke yesterday about some of you guys working 20 years ago with those stuff, and only a few names that have said like you or like Ken Case or like Will Shipley. Are there some other names that come out of your mind from people that have been there for such a long time doing this stuff?
Well, sure. There's people from way back. So Scott Anguish, for example, has been involved with the Next Community forever. He had a news website called Stepwise that published the news for Cocoa programmers and essays. So it's hard to imagine the old Next Step community without him. Everyone who's ever worked at Next, even though it was a small company, a lot of them are still doing Objective-C programming. So a lot of the people at Apple, for example, have been doing Next programming for a very long time. Old timers. See, I feel bad naming people because I'm going to leave people off. And it really is hundreds of people.
But my point is that it's pretty interesting, and thank you, computer, for always going to sleep.
Did you edit that out?
Well, some of those, but not everything. Actually, my point is I used to say that the best thing Apple ever did was to fire Steve Jobs in 1985 because it gave him the opportunity to go and create Next, and then came back with. And it's funny how Next has changed Apple.
Oh, I think it's hard to overstate the effect that Next had upon Apple. At the time when we were purchased, Apple was doing OS 7, was late in the 7s, and didn't have multitasking really, definitely not preemptive multitasking, didn't have virtual memory. It was what we would consider today sort of an embedded operating system. And we at Next, when we started looking at it, we were astonished that this operating system was still so popular. So we really brought them into the modern operating system era. But more than that, we brought a culture with us, and that was Steve at the head. And a lot of the people that you see at the top of the org chart at Apple now are former Next people, and they brought a certain style and aesthetic to the game. And it's been a really exciting 10 years to see OS 10 come out and improve year after year. Really major releases at a regular pace.
Speaking of loop, I was talking about this loop about Steve going and coming back and so on and so forth. You also have kind of your loop of teaching, writing, coding.
Right. So I feel very lucky that in my career, in my day-to-day life, I get to do some writing, some programming, and I also do some teaching. I used to teach a lot more. I used to teach the open enrollment classes. Now, when we roll out a new class, sometimes I come and I teach a few sections just to try out the new materials. I'm very passionate about teaching, and I'm very passionate about writing, and I'm still a programmer. So one of the things that I rolled out during my presentation was a persistence framework that I wrote. And I think people think of me as the old guy because I wrote the book that everybody learned from. So it's nice every once in a while to show off, I can still code. I was a coder before I was a writer.
I'm not dead, you told me yesterday.
Exactly. I'm not dead yet. I'm still writing code. It's become a really nice mix because Big Nerd Ranch does books and training and also consulting. So you can rent Big Nerd Ranch employees by the hour to solve your problems.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, so it's pretty cool. Thank you very much for giving me these interviews. And if there is one thing you could say to the people out there who hasn't started yet with Objective-C and Cocoa, what would be the key message?
Well, I hate to steal the Nike tagline, but really just do it. There's no point in trying to avoid it by trying to do Mac Ruby or whatever, or what is the mono touch. Just bite the bullet, learn Objective-C, do it for at least a couple of months. And then if you really still believe that you want to go back to Ruby or Monotouch for iPhone development, then do it. But I don't think you will.
Monotouch thingy is actually the one that afraids me the most because I used to be a .NET developer. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with .NET or C#, but if you're going to do it, do it.
Just do it.
The way others are doing it.
Right. Right.
It's no fun because for me Monotouch is not really being part of the community. It's like, I want to do this iPhone thingy, but
I don't want to really get wet yet.
Yeah,
jump in.
All right, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.